Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to Senate Education. Excuse me. We are returning to conversation around financing, Act 127, an act relating to improving student equity by adjusting the school funding formula and providing education quality and funding oversight. We have a joint hearing next week on school budgets, taxes, what we're seeing out there. We're going to be with the Finance Committee, we're going to do House Education, and we're going to be with Ways and Means Committee in the House. This will help give us a little bit more information on Act 127 before we go into that. Question?
I was giving Marty a thumbs up.
Okay.
No worries.
I'm getting her self-serve.
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like it?
I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, we're all set.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay. So, okay, now that Senator Hewlett's here, we are ready to go. So, Ms. Zaglowski, thanks for joining us.
What day
You're
is it?
welcome. You're welcome. I'm here with Jeff Francis and Morgan Daybell. We're doing this together, the three of us.
Thursday.
So I think our approach is that we can certainly provide you with some basic information. It's very good to hear that you are meeting collaboratively with those other committees next week on this topic.
Yes.
And then we're really here to answer any questions that you have.
That's great. Thank you so much. And welcome, Mr. Francis and Mr. Daybell. What I think we would love to understand a little bit more. You just have to mute. Is that on your end or?
Jeff needs to move. There we go.
There we go. Okay, so what we'd love to understand more about how 127 is impacting schools, school districts, what you're seeing out there. I suspect, I'd be shocked if all of you are not invited next Thursday to have this conversation with all of us, all four committees. So I thought this might give us an opportunity to tee things up and have a conversation so that when we get there Thursday, it'll be as productive as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the way the system work, and I haven't been remotely in your committee yet this year, will like one person unmute at a time to speak? Is that how?
It's a great question.
Is that the protocol?
Oh, do you know what gave us the echo? There must be something. Is it possible, Jeff, that Jeff's?
Jeff. Is it?
You have a
I don't think. I think. How is it now?
perfect. Oh no, it's not. Can you go get your? You're gonna get the IT person in. For the meantime, if you
The
don't
reason
mind.
that I asked is, yeah, I'm gonna mute.
But we can't hear you, of course, when you mute, so there's some kind of little issue, but the IT person will be here momentarily.
Jeff, do you have I wonder if you have multiple screens open?
You can just
Sometimes-
close one.
Sometimes, oh, okay.
No, I think that may be it. Is that
That's
working better now?
Oh, that's
That's
perfect, yeah,
great.
perfect.
Okay. I apologize for that.
It's not, sorry.
It's Okay.
Just for a second.
That was for a second.
Yeah, it just if I don't know if you've got an echo there, and that sounds like you do. You've got two Senate Ed committees here in this Zoom, and I think you're getting echo off yourself. So one needs to be muted.
They just said to move the speakers away from the camera or to use headphones.
Would you bring her in, please?
Okay.
This might be this,
I think it's on our end.
right.
Yeah, because it was both Jeff and
Okay.
both Jeffs.
Then your coffee comes anyways, because
Yeah.
so it's a recording device you have, in your water.
That's why you have this giant logo.
We believe it's on our end.
Okay. Anyone have a laptop? Do you
No.
Turn on.
Everybody goes to their stuff. I'm trying. Okay, Jeff, do you mind trying again? You mind unmuting and
Testing 1, 2.
I think we're still having the same problem. Yeah. What would you suggest they do?
Let me see. Oh.
That's the same problem we had. That's a fraction of our, we have
Yeah.
Oh, really?
gremlins. Must be
It's
gremlins.
definitely gremlins.
Marty, microphone, just make sure it's not your phone.
Okay. There's nothing going on my phone.
It shows you well.
No, just kidding.
Is Jeff the only one having an issue?
No, Jeff and also.
They both.
They all
yeah,
have
maybe-
issues.
Maybe we should try again.
Ian?
Should we try again? Jeff Fannin, can we try with you?
Sure. I think the problem may be that you have two Senate eds open and echoing off each other.
It's not, because he's not doing it.
We're not doing it right now.
Sound good right now.
Sounds
Sounds
great.
good? Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And we're just waiting for Jeff Francis and we'll check with Jeff Francis. But Jeff Fannin, you thought it was what?
I'm seeing two Senate Education Zoom rooms,
Ah, would that be making?
and
it
and one is not, neither one is muted.
That would be it.
this one, it has nothing connected.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
And is there another?
This one is, but that's this room, so it needs to be unmuted.
Yeah.
And he's not hearing me, I couldn't have.
Yeah, we're not hearing it now.
It was Jeff Francis.
Yeah. All right, Jeff Francis, will you give it a shot? Let's see how you do.
So I'll test it again.
So would you tell him?
Yeah. Jeff, it sounds like you have a speaker on somewhere. In your.
Okay. So
Sure.
I'm gonna move to Sue Zagorski's.
Okay.
Take the off car for us. It's all.
We're starting.
Are we starting? Yeah.
That was operation.
I don't really care.
Please. Okay, we're ready to go?
Thanks, dude.
Thanks, Delia.
Thanks, Delia. Ms. Zaglowski.
Yes, I am here and Jeff is coming down to my office, so he is
Thank you.
in the
I
chair now.
understand he might have a couple of speakers on in his office that he doesn't, somebody's probably recording him, and he doesn't realize it. Mr. Francis, thanks for joining us. You heard the prompt. If you could just weigh in and let us know what you're hearing out there from school districts, superintendents, others on this, on the impact of Act 127.
Sure, and if you don't object, Mr. Chair, I wanted to make just a couple of contextual comments first.
Absolutely.
Okay, so number one, thank you to whomever has called that hearing for next Thursday. Because I would say that the dynamics about the FY 25 school district budgeting process and the transition to Act 127 have a lot of people's attention, and even increasingly so. So the reason that Mr. Daybell and Ms. Zaglowski and myself have been traveling together on this topic is because the School Boards Association, the Business Managers Association, VASBO, and VSA have been working together on the implementation of the law, really since the late summer, early fall. And we've done a lot of professional learning around the transition to the new weights, because school districts are adjusting to what's referred to in the law as tax capacity. As you know, that some districts have lost tax capacity where the weights adjusted their pupil count, which is the denominator in calculating ed spending, has been lowered. And in places where the denominator increased, it has an effect on the ed spending per pupil calculation. The reason that we've worked with VASBO is because that's the association of all the school district business managers, and school boards, for obvious reasons. They ultimately make the budgets. So I think that we've been pretty effective in supporting our members through that process. At our first testimony on the topic, which was in the House Ways and Means ago on January 9th, which seems like a long time ago, but was really only 10 days or so ago, we focused on the cost pressures that school districts are experiencing in general. And the reason that we were asked to talk about the cost pressures is because when the December 1 tax letter came out, it had lots of people's attention because of the predicted 12% increase in education spending FY25 over FY24 and the resultant property tax increases. So that was something that everybody was concerned about. I think that's justifiable. And they wanted to know, meaning the Ways and Means Committee, what we were seeing for cost pressures. And without going into great detail on that topic, I will say that, and I'm going to run through these quickly, in the post-COVID era, we've seen tremendous pressures on salaries and wages. We've seen a steep increase this year in terms of healthcare costs. We've seen the manifestation of mental health needs societally as they play out in schools. And we're also contending with the loss of ESSER funds. ESSER monies were used to sustain us through the pandemic, and school districts are making individual decisions about whether to retain positions that they created with ESSER monies and so on and so forth. Two complicating factors in terms of the cost standpoint is the recently released report on infrastructure needs in schools, and also just the competitive market for school employees, period. So, in summary, a lot of upward pressure on school district budgets. Soon after the December 1 tax letter was released, we started to hear more and more about the potential influences of the common level of appraisal. And on January 1, the tax department released its equalization report, and school districts, I think, across the state were surprised to see that in many instances, the common level of appraisal was decreased in communities. So we're starting to hear not only about the 18% increase in property taxes, but also what the effects were of changes in CLA amounts and how that is contributing to projected tax bill increases in communities across the state. So that's an important part of the context. Second important part of the context is when you consider the education delivery system, we operate off a singular education fund, but we're deploying the monies from that fund across 120 school districts in Vermont. And those school districts, I think it's fair to say, are the manifestation of local control. So a lot of the features that exist community to community to community, depending on perceived wealth in the community, what their historic governance models have been, whether there's been transition in their administrative staff, transition and school board members, it all plays out differently. So it's a complicated system to begin with. When 127 as a transition in order to introduce more equity into the system came to pass, it became even more complicated. So now we're at a place where school districts are wrapping up their FY25 budget preparation. The General Assembly is right at the start of its own legislative session. So when you have that hearing next week, I think we should predict that there's going to be a lot of different input from school officials and others representing communities across the state that are going to respond to the dynamics that I just described in an overview. And one of the things that we're seeing right now is Act 127 working in the way that it was intended to. And a central question, I think, associated with that implementation goes to a feature in the bill, which is the 5% property tax capping feature that said, in order to support the transition, both to districts that were seeing added tax capacity and those that were losing tax capacity, what's the utilization of that 5% capping feature? And frankly, I think we can anticipate that it was used differently in different communities. So what we just started to learn about over the course of the last week is that some of the districts that lost tax capacity are using it to support spending, both to, for lack of a better term, use a soft, create a soft landing for themselves. But the conversation in the building, and this is now expanding, is what is the influence of that, what it means for ed spending overall, what the effects will be relative to the ed fund, et cetera. So I was happy to hear that hearing has been scheduled, because I think it's going to be an important opportunity for local school officials to come in and talk with legislators about just how this is working. So that's sort of my perspective on it as of today. I think that the influences community to community with respect to gaining more tax capacity or less tax capacity are going to get ultimately filtered through the question, have we in year one of Act 127 implementation induced more equity into the system? And I think that's something that's going to need to be examined, because the features of the bill that I just described, I think, are playing out in different ways. So it's something that has the focus of the three associations, VSBA, VSA, and VASBO. I think it's something that we both will and need to learn more about. That's where, at least from my vantage point, we are today. Now, I think,
if I may just interrupt, Senator Dewitt has a question.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Francis, for this. Every time I hear it, it sinks in a little bit more and I have a better understanding, so I appreciate it. My question around 127, and I'm looking forward to the hearing, don't get me wrong, but I have the sense that there's not much we can do to stop the bleed this year. We might be able to fix that loophole for next year.
Great question.
But is there do you see, in your personal opinion, do you see a way to minimize, I can't use the word I want to use.
Yeah,
I'm trying to be politically correct and fair in my language. So we want this to be about equity, right? So is there a way to achieve the equity that we were hoping to get in Act 127 this year?
So as you often hear when you have folks from the Joint Fiscal or Legislative Council before you, they sometimes say that's a policy decision. And I would not rule out actions that the legislature could take this year. But my contribution, I think, could be to considering ideas that members of the General Assembly have itself. So Ms. Siglowski, Morgan Daybell, and I think we'll have all got experience working with the array of school districts that I referenced. But I would not, I don't have anything on the top of my head that would address any problems that could arise from the first year implementation of Act 127. But either after that hearing or before, if legislators have ideas, I'd be a eager participant in those discussions. But I don't have anything. I don't have anything to offer right this minute.
Okay. And you're talking specifically around what we could do even this year.
Yeah. So if the depending on the problem statement, right? So if the problem statement is property taxes are rising too much, there might be some things the General Assembly could do. If the problem statement was, we're concerned that we're not achieving the equity that we'd hoped for through Act 127, there's some things perhaps that the legislature could do. But, I think we're all painfully aware of the fact that the legislature just convened a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking about a budget development process that is pretty well completed, right? The school district started their budgeting process in October. The data relative to their long-term average daily membership count, which is the equivalent of equalized pupils in prior years, that was not settled until just a couple of weeks ago for many school districts. The CLA numbers came out on January 1, and school boards who are working with what they considered to be, I'll say, predictive tax rates based on the budget work they had done, were now confronted with, steep increases in property tax bills because their CLAs had fallen. So it's a factor that I did not include in my opening comments, but another complicating factor in this year's budget cycle has been the rapid gain in real estate values, principally homestead values, that I would say, and I don't have this factually, but I think people will largely agree, greater increases in real estate values over the last 2-year period than Vermont had ever seen before. So, there are people who are more well-equipped than I am to talk about how all these factors add up to mounting pressure on the education fund and local school district budgets. But it is true that that's a real factor this year.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about in this committee, everybody's talking about, is are we going to have a record number of budgets voted down? And then people are going to go back to the drawing board, and what's that going to look like for the spring and possibly even later?
I mean, if I can make a comment on that, the one thing that is gratifying to me is that folks realize that there's a tremendous connection between state policymakers and what happens at the local level. We've got a statewide ed fund that supports all those local school district budgets. And if we're in a challenging period right now, meaning the FY25 budget cycle, I think that we should remember that we're all in this together. We ought to be working on this together. And if there is a way to alleviate whatever pressures we're going to experience, then we should be doing it together. I think that the public hearing next week is a good place or a good initiative to contribute to that problem solving. I think that, there could be a tendency, which I hope folks will resist, to point fingers at one of the participants or another. As my from my vantage point as executive director of the Superintendent's Association, I think it is all laudable intent on the part of everyone from the General Assembly all the way down to local school district officials. And to the extent that we have problems to solve, both known and maybe unforeseen, we ought to all be turning into those problems together.
Thank you. And just a clarification on my part, it's a joint hearing. I don't know how the witnesses, I think anybody who's interested in putting forward witness ideas are going to be more than welcome. But I don't have the impression it's one of our more traditional public hearings where, anybody, wants to come in. I just
Got
want
it.
to
I understand. Okay, thank you.
make, Senator Williams.
Is JFO going to be involved in this
Sure.
discussion?
Yeah, he'll be there. Great.
I'd be happy to yield now to Mr. Glowski and Mr. Davis.
Perfect.
You probably would like to have me do that too.
I appreciate your message of
Yeah,
unity,
you make
Jeff.
sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, we have Jeff Bannis testimony. Thank you. He's up. Mr. Glowski, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to what Jeff Francis expressed to let you know that we think it's very important for you to have the most up-to-date data that you can have in this situation and not to be relying only on stories from different districts. So if you're able to get updated data through the Agency of Education, we think that would be very, very helpful. I also wanted to let you know that the VSBA just got finished providing a webinar for our members about communicating their district's priority needs when presenting their budget. So it was all about how board members can work collaboratively to ensure passage of the budget, engaging with their community, and strategies for making a clear connection between the budget and the vision and mission and priorities of their school district. So we hope that that information is going to be helpful to our members as they're working on passing their budgets. And at this point, I'd be happy to hand it over to Mr. Daybell, if that's okay.
Yes, please. Mr. Daybell, welcome.
Thank you, and I don't really have much to add on top of what Jeff and Sue have already mentioned. I do want to say, as my association, business managers across the state have been navigating the additional uncertainty in the budgeting process this year, I think it's important to note that everyone, whether they're so-called advantaged or disadvantaged under Act 127, has been steadfastly in support of the underlying law and the concept of equity behind it. So that has been universal, and I think we need to mention that right up top. Jeff had talked about some of the funding pressures this year, and I would just add to that districts like mine that are seeing more students under the new model have been adding costs that maybe we would not have in the past, such as for one of my districts, an English language teacher that they did not have in the past. And that ultimately is the intent of 127. And so I think that there should be a recognition that while there are budgetary pressures, they're not all dire or negative.
If I could, somewhere between possibly Morgan and Sue, I believe at this point the districts have presented their budgets. And is there a collated matrix of who's up and who's down and how it's, just kind of like district by district on a summary? Or is that best coming from our JFO?
Yeah, I don't believe that exists yet. Certainly when I'm in one-on-one meetings with folks, I will ask where they are in the process and in terms of whether they're up or down and is their tax rate up or down. But I don't think there's a comprehensive data collection that's out there since last November.
Okay, so we're seeing it in the papers that this district just presented the budget, it's off this, but it's not, you guys don't have it as an organization, you don't collect that.
I know.
My David colleague,
Yes.
about the second time today.
If he so chooses.
Can I deny?
Yes.
Are you asking for taxing capacity going up or down, or you want budget numbers?
It's
Like
budget.
how high,
Because
what's your increase,
District to
5%,
district,
6%?
we started the conversation 2 weeks ago or so with, hey, here's the anticipated, or the overall budget impact.
Right.
Which, we're seeing piecemeal.
No,
Like
I
our
hear
district,
you, I just wanted to make sure you weren't talking about taxing capacity.
not yet.
Email
Yeah.
Julia Richter and see if she can zoom in for a minute.
Yeah.
We'll ask her. Yes.
Just a question, was there an education fund surplus last year play into this at all? I mean, why was there a surplus? Cause I know that a lot of the property taxpayers got a check, or actually went back to the towns. And a couple of my constituents found out about it and were really upset, why didn't it come back to me? Now, I guess they're gonna apply that surplus, that rebate to the municipal education tax.
I don't know.
Anybody aware of that?
Mr. Robinson? Oh, did you want to answer?
I can attempt.
Okay.
For the record, Colin Robinson, Vermont NEA, if Julia joins you, you'll see on the bottom of the Ed Fund Outlook that you all chose to reserve a certain amount, I believe about 13 million, don't quote me on that, to the bottom line of the Ed Fund for use in the Ed Fund this year around property tax rates. If that's what you're referring to, Senator Williams, that is there. And I believe the December 1st letter is required to incorporate that into any rate reductions.
But I was also told that rebate that they got from the state can only be used, could be applied to education.
That money was held on the bottom line of the education fund to be applied in the education fund. Yeah.
Mr. Francis, did you want to add something?
I just, as you know, Julia Richter is the best person to reply to this. So if you get her, that'll be great. The revenues to the Ed Fund are variable year to year based on the performance of the various tax components that make up of it. So, the property taxes are a big source of monies for the Ed Fund, but there are an array of other taxes that go in as well. And my recollection, and she's going to be able to confirm this, is that through the COVID years, the revenues were very strong in the Ed Fund and some of the expenditures were down because in some instances, schools weren't operating. Last year, with the surplus in the Ed Fund, the General Assembly made a decision to use monies for both the PCB program and universal school meals. So, those are policy decisions that the General Assembly makes, but there is an ebb and flow on an annual basis to both the sources and the uses in the Ed Fund. So Julia will be able to give you an expert treatment of the explanation to the question, but my best response is that each year is different and the General Assembly makes decisions around the uses of the money in particular, depending on what the resources available to the Ed Fund are.
Thank you.
As we're waiting to see if perhaps Ms. Richter is going to join us, I wanted to shift to Mr. Fannin. Unless Sue or Morgan, Mr. Daybell, Ms. Siglowski, did you want to have any final comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, great.
Nothing to add, but happy to answer any other questions if they come up.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jeff Fannin, Executive Director of Vermont NEA. Thanks for inviting me here to this discussion. I'm, like Jeff Francis said, I think it's great that there's going to be a joint committee hearing next week. We would very much like to participate in that and will. I think Jeff did a nice job of contextualizing this. This is a dynamic budgeting season, the greatest one I've seen in my tenure, I think. And And there's a lot of changes at play here. And obviously Jeff identified the healthcare's gone up a lot, salary pressures, as those are national problems, right? Those are not unique and exclusive to Vermont. Those are national challenges that everybody's facing across the country. So we're not immune to the pressures nationally, and people are rational actors, and school boards, superintendents, business managers, teachers all act rationally, and their budgets are just simply meeting the needs of the kids, really, and that's what they're all doing. I don't think they're wasting money. They're just I've never thought that. I think that schools do a good job. They're publicly accountable. People get to vote on their school budgets, and that's a good thing. And they get to elect their school board members. That's a good thing. We have adults involved in the lives of children throughout the state, and likewise, that's a good thing. So, the dynamics are challenging right now. Back in 2021, I just went back earlier this morning and looked at some of my testimony to the weighting task force. We supported the change in the weights. We may have had differences about how the solution came about, but we certainly wanted schools to have more equitable access to the education fund dollars. And we knew there would be transitions, and that's why last year the 5% cap was put into place. These were all knowable things, and when the December 1st letter came out, there were some pressures on it, but I think it seemed within the norms. I think the big change has been the CLA, and I don't know if it was Sue or Jeff just said it. The increase in home values statewide is like nothing I've ever seen, and that's great because most people, their largest asset is their home. Their home value is going up. That's great. But it does cause, with the CLA, some challenges. And so I think that that is something that's worthy of exploration next week, I guess. And you'll get some information, I'm sure, from Julia about that and other things. I don't think right now there's any magic solution. I walked into the State House a week or so ago with Jeff Francis, and we discussed this, and neither one of us had a silver bullet. If there was one, I think we would all have used it by now, or at least waved it around. It's going to take some rolling up the sleeves and some creative minds, and I think that sounds like that's what's going to happen next week. So it is challenging, and we know that what schools are doing are meeting the needs of their students, and that's a good thing.
It's very helpful.
Yeah,
Question?
I don't have a solution for you, Senator.
Yeah.
I wish I did.
Yeah. Well, I think your point's a good one. Next week, we'll gather and have a deeper conversation with all of us, other committees, other experts, and see what we can come up with, if anything. Or as Senator Bulick said, this might be the situation that we're in, and we might not be able to change direction at this point. And we'll see what happens on meeting day, and then what legislature might do after that.
It's fast approaching as town meeting day, that is.
All right, we don't have Ms. Richter available. She come in when she has time this afternoon. We'll interrupt for 10 minutes. So we'll have Ms. Richter in later today, but we aren't going to be able to get her now. Anybody have any final comments or questions from this group of witnesses? I guess the only thing I'm wondering is, Ms. Siglowski, probably have your ear to the ground better than anyone right now around what school boards are thinking might happen in March. Anything you can say to that, about that?
Well, I can say they're working very hard to prepare for that vote and to communicate with their communities in various ways to make sure that the most information can get out there. And I think they're preparing budgets that they feel are responsible and meet the needs of their students and working to pass them.
Well, thank you for that. Anything else? Okay, we will, Mr. Bannon, anything else?
No, just gonna say thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, committee, we'll return at 3:30 for school safety, and Act 29.